The EU recently passed the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act, or the EU AI Act for short, which is the first law worldwide governing the use of and the creation of AI tools. Today, I'll talk about this act, talk about the impacts of this act on your business, and also hopefully make it easier for you to understand. Welcome to the Tech Your Business podcast, where we break down technology so you can apply it to help your business make more money and do more in less time. I'm Peter Banigo. I'm the founder of Target ICT Limited, a fully remote IT consulting firm, and I'm your host today. First off, as with every episode like this, nothing I've said and nothing I am going to say is legal advice, as I am not, and I have no plans right now of being a lawyer. So you should consult with a professional before you take any action based on what I've said. So that said, I'm sure you've heard about the EU AI Act. I'm sure you're also curious about it and what it means for you, what it means for your business. We use AI regularly, so I sure am bothered. So that's why I had to do some research, ask questions, and then make this episode from my findings. So the EU AI Act is the first of its kind in the world. For over a year, almost 2 years now, AI and AI tools have exploded everywhere. Everyone is using AI. And while most of the use cases have been decent, we have also seen AI used in less than decent scenarios. So we've seen AI used in cloning people's voices. We've seen AI used in making fake videos of people, things that have been used for fraud and other illegal activity. And this makes me understand why governments would want to regulate AI. So the Act aims to establish the European Union as a leader in AI regulation. And some goals of the Act are making sure that all AI systems developed and used within the European Union can be trusted by the public and would also respect fundamental rights and values of the people. The Act seeks to reduce potential harm or negative impacts of AI when it comes to issues like safety, privacy, and discrimination. The Act also aims to encourage investment and development in the EU AI space by positioning Europe as a global hub for ethical and responsible AI. So basically, they want to have a law in place for AI, because where there is no law, you might have people develop, build things, and then a law springs up, rendering everything they've built invalid. So as with every law like the GDPR came before this, there are usually implications, and these implications usually don't only affect businesses in the EU. So for instance, you can see after the GDPR in 2018, we've seen almost every website get huge cookie banners on them. Almost every app also gets huge cookie banners because of the GDPR, which was meant for, or which was enacted just by the EU. So this means that every business that develops, supports, or uses AI would need to pay attention to this law to know how this law would affect their operation. So let's talk about that. The EU AI Act classifies AI systems based on the risk they are believed to carry. So that's the main foundation of the Act, classifying these AI systems based on risk. So according to the Act, there are four main risk categories. First is unacceptable, then there is high risk, there is limited risk, and there is minimal risk. Those are the four main categories of risk covered in the Act. So let's go over this one after the other. The first is the unacceptable risk systems. Unacceptable risk systems are banned, prohibited. unacceptable by the AI Act. So unacceptable risk AI systems are systems that are believed to pose the most threat to people and humanity. Examples of AI systems that will be considered unacceptable risk under the Act are systems that can identify people in real time in public spaces, systems that carry out social scoring. I'm sure you've heard of the rumors about social scoring and all that, how you can be monitored while you're walking on the streets, and any infraction you commit would automatically be logged against you. So something like that's what social scoring is about. So the AI Act totally prohibits systems that can carry out these functions. Next is the high risk systems. According to the Act, high risk systems are allowed, but they are highly regulated. Apart from that, they would also have to satisfy laid down requirements before being used. So anyone or any organization who provides high risk systems is expected to comply with regulations on transparency, risk management, and human oversight. Examples of high risk AI systems are those used in processes like education and employment decisions, used in determining access to essential services, used in law enforcement, and for similar systems. So all these are what come under are the systems that come under high risk systems. The next would be the limited risk AI systems. Limited risk systems pose fewer risks than the previous, the unacceptable and the high risk systems. I've said so much risk today, I might bite my tongue in the process. So examples of AI systems which fall under the limited risk category are chatbots. We all use chatbots a lot. I think that those are the most used in the most used systems by the general public. Then also another one is the AI systems which can create the deep fakes. So like the voice cloning systems, the video creation systems, and co. These come under the limited risk systems. So in the EU AI Act, with AI systems falling under this limited risk category, the main requirement is that users need to be clearly informed that they are interacting with an AI system. So there should be labels, there should be warnings, and thereabouts. And the last category, which out of the four I mentioned earlier, is the minimal risk category, which includes the majority of current AI applications like video games, spam filters, and the rest. These minimal risk categories are essentially unregulated by the AI Act. So in summary, the regulation classifies systems with the harshest rules applying to those which they believe pose the highest risk, and more lenient or even no regulation at all for the lower risk system. So businesses using AI would need to carefully assess the systems they use, the tools they use, and also try to determine where their tools fall within this framework in order to ensure compliance. Now that we've talked about the classifications, one particularly interesting aspect of the EU Act, which I'd like to touch on, is how it deals with a category of AI known as general purpose AI or GPAI. So the act is about for almost 500 pages, and so one aspect and one thing that's mentioned a lot are the GPAI. So GPAI are large, complex AI models that can do a lot of things like language generation, translation and all that, image creation, and more. So these models are normally used as building blocks for many different AI applications. So a lot of the popular AI applications you see are usually plugged in the backend to these GPAI models. The EU Act recognizes that GPAI models pose unique challenges and risks to people, to humanity. So it has put in place specific rules for providers of these type of systems. First of all, the GPAI model providers, whether their model is open source or their code is proprietary, have to meet certain requirements on transparency. So this means first they have to provide technical documentation about the model. It needs to be accessible. Secondly, they need to supply information to end users about what the model is capable and is not capable of. This is important. This point is important. They have a policy to respect intellectual property rights like copyright for any content used in training the model. We all know that these AI models are fed a lot of data, and whatever they regurgitate or whatever they bring out is based on this data they are fed. So this rule forces them to have a policy to respect intellectual property rights while getting that data and while processing that data. And finally, they need to publish a summary of the training data that was used in training their models. Additionally, for GPI models that pose or present systemic risk, that's the word used in the Act. For example, for models that have been trained using a lot of computing power, there are additional requirements. So providers of these high-impact GPI models must, first of all, regularly test and evaluate the models to identify and control risks. Secondly, they must assess and manage potential systemic risks. Thirdly, they must make sure the cybersecurity of these tools is top-notch. Very important. And finally, they have to track, report, and address any serious incidents that come up in the course of using these models. So the idea behind these extra requirements is to ensure that most these powerful AI models are developed and deployed responsibly with proper safeguards in place. So this GPAI framework is an important part of the EU AI Act, as these large-scale models are becoming increasingly central to the AI system. Like I said, most AI tools you use are plugged into these larger models. And as a result, businesses that work with or provide GPI systems would need to be aware of these rules, this set of rules. So now that we've covered the key aspects of the EU AI Act, let's talk about how this act is going to impact businesses that work with AI systems. The simple reality is that the AI Act is going to apply broadly, affecting any company that develops, deploys, or uses AI in the European Union, regardless of whether the business is based in the EU or not. So if your AI systems or their outputs are being used within the EU, you need to ensure that you're compliant with this EU AI Act, and the specific requirements, the specific obligations you have for compliance will depend on your role in the AI value chain. So first of all, for providers or for the developers of these AI systems, providers of high-risk AI systems are in for a lot with this act. So they have to ensure things like implementing robust risk management, like I mentioned earlier, ensuring the training data is of really high quality, providing detailed technical documentation. They need to provide detailed technical documentation and also enable human oversights. So there are actual people monitoring these systems to make sure they don't have these Skynets. Then for the deployers, that's people that install these AI systems for businesses and co, even if they don't develop the AI themselves, as a deployer, you still have some responsibilities. So these responsibilities, some of them are complying with the instructions from the provider or developer, monitoring the performance of the AI system, and reporting any incidents that come up. Then finally, for all businesses that use these AI systems, regardless of role, all companies will need to understand where their AI systems fall under the Act's risk classification. And they should be prepared also to adapt their processes, adapt their practices accordingly, and comply accordingly to with whatever the act says. So this might require things like conducting self-assessments, modifying their workflows and things like that. So the stakes are really high, as non-compliance with the EU AI Act can result in penalties of up to $30 million or 6% of global annual turnover, which is a significant financial risk that no business can afford to ignore. I know I talked about the GDPR earlier, and we saw the fines businesses pay as a result of that act. So that's why everyone should be really careful, really aware of this act too. The key is to get ahead of this regulation. That's the purpose of this episode. And the entire act will be linked in the show notes below. The key also is to understand how this act applies to your organization and to take proactive steps to ensure that your business is meeting the requirements, because preparing now would help you avoid costly compliance issues down the line. The next thing we'll talk about, and I know I mentioned that already, are is the enforcement and the penalties. So to oversee the implementation and enforcement of the EU AI Act, the regulation has established a new body called the European AI Office. So this office, which will be part of the European Commission, will be responsible for monitoring compliance with the acts, conducting evaluations and investigations into potential violations, providing guidance and support to the member states of the EU on this act, maintaining a database, an up-to-date database of high-risk AI systems, and importantly, also the AI office will have the power to impose penalties on companies that fail to meet with requirements of the act. So these penalties, like I said, these fines are not a small matter. They can be up to 30 million euros or 6% of a company's global turnover, whichever is higher. And that's, like I said, it's something that no business can ignore. So the stakes are really high for businesses, and failing to get your AI practices, your AI workflows, processes in order, and failing to demonstrate compliance can have severe financial consequences. So, like I said, this is something businesses, companies cannot afford to ignore. Beyond the direct impact on businesses, the EU Act also has a much broader significance. As this is the first comprehensive legislation of its kind, it's likely to set a global precedent. The GDPR was enacted in 2018, and we saw that after that, so many countries, so many states in the US have started, even till this year, have started enacting data privacy laws. So for this EU Act, it's likely to be similar, where you see so many countries, so many states use this as a base framework to enact their own laws. So it's something to be, if you're compliant with this, you're more likely to be compliant with things that with other AI regulations that come up later. And at the same time, too, apart from that, it's important to ensure to recognize that the AI landscape is rapidly evolving. So as new AI capabilities, new use cases emerge, these acts might need to be updated, might need to be adapted over time to stay ahead of the curve, because AI is something nobody really understands. It's just going faster than everything else. So ultimately, the goal of this act is to ensure that the power of AI is harnessed in a way that benefits the entire society. And with setting clear rules and standards, the act aims to encourage innovation while also protecting the fundamental rights and values of citizens of the European Union. So it's a really delicate balance, probably maybe an attempt to, like I said, avoid Skynet. And as AI becomes more pervasive, AI becomes critical. AI is used everywhere in our daily lives. I think these days you can't avoid AI, honestly. It's in your phones, it's in your TVs, it's everywhere. So that's the explanation. We've come to the end of this episode. We've talked about the different risk categories. We've talked about the GPAIs. We've talked about the impact on your business. And I believe with that, this episode has delivered on the promise of explaining the EUAI Act and talking about the impact on your business. Like I said, none of this is legal advice. So if you want to take any action on anything about the AI Act, forget this episode, talk to a lawyer. Did you get any value from this episode? If you did, please share with anyone you know that it would help. Anyone who maybe does business in the EU, uses AI, and would be interested, or it would be important for that person to know about this EU AI Act. And if you want to be the first to know when we post more helpful content like this, don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to or watching it on. We've talked a lot about AI on this podcast. We've talked about writing better content with AI. We've talked about how your business can thrive in this AI revolution. That was one of the first episodes, and that was using an AI voice of me. So you can go down you have over 70 episodes now. You can just go through anything that catches your fancy, anything you feel would be relevant or useful to your business. Just enjoy yourself listening, and over the next 1 week, when we come back with another episode, don't forget to keep taking your business. Bye for now.